So, good morning. It's 8 o'clock, and we're at the intersection where faith, community, and civic leaders intersect to get smarter together, to lead together, to learn together, move together more collaboratively throughout our city. So, some time for announcements. I sent out a notice yesterday with two things afoot. One is this afternoon, off the top of my head, like at 3 o'clock. But this is a national. I'm sure there are going to be some global. I know there's some folks that are going to be there from Australia, but mayors talking about civility in our world and how desperately that's needed, and that our mayor will be keynoting that. So it's 2 hours, but I'm sure you can stay, drop in for however long. There are like 600 people who are signed up for it. So we're going to be hearing from mayors from all over. So I encourage that. Always encourage civility. Next Wednesday is the annual Multi-Faith Symposium that the Fusion Center in San Antonio helps to put together. If you haven't heard about the Fusion Center, it's an intersection within security and safety in our city. So it's SAPD, FBI, the fire department, where they all intersect the fusion. And so they always bring kind of updates to the faith community. And it is in person, but there are also updates that go the other direction. So Erica Holler Stevenson is going to be giving a full briefing and update on the violence prevention strategy that we helped to put together. And we'll be hearing from the faith community, or I should say the police department, the Fusion folks will be hearing from the faith community. And so that's next Wednesday, the 16th, from 8 until noon. And it does come with food. So, and I think they open the doors at 7:30. So I hope some of you join in that. I also meant to send out, and I'll send it out. It's been coming out in news and other things as well, but there's a global youth conference that's happening on the 17th and 18th, and put together by young people, something like 18 to 35, that age group, from all over the world, and what is happening these days in our world. And anybody can go, it's not limited to youth, but that's on the 17th and 18th. I went to kind of an earlier one, a precursor to that this summer. Amazing. It was amazing. I learned so much. I just can't recommend going to that enough, to hear kind of the prophetic voice of our young people in the world. So I'll send that information out too. All of those are at no cost. So other than time and time investment, which is a valuable one. Other announcements, we got about a minute or two more. Martha Ann, I see that she's either just signing on or she's thinking about an announcement.
I'm thinking about Peace Day at the University of the Incarnate Word, always the last Wednesday of October, remembering Bernie O'Halloran, who was violently killed. So we have education on justice and peace. And it's themed this year around our efforts to build a Camino of compassion and peace from San Antonio, a city of compassion, to Monterey, a city of compassion. In the middle of the day, David Grisham will be leading us in the Peace Games, the wonderful movement, Peace on Earth by 2030. Let's do the actions that build positive peace. And you know what we do at the intersection is a wonderful example of action to build positive peace.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you, Martha Ann. One more? Otherwise, we'll just jump in. All righty. So we've been running this series, Be the Neighbor, all summer, but it looks like it's going to go into the fall and into even the winter, maybe, because we've been getting some really good briefings on what's happening in terms of emergencies and networking through Sacred and housing plan as well as builds. So we're going through all the different kind of collaborative efforts that we've been working on and have been working in our city in different ways. And it's really building a nice library. I'll put into the chat a link. I highly recommend this to people who are new or into San Antonio, or you're just wanting to get kind of caught up because our briefing time is about 10, 15 minutes. And you can go through these from this kind of library and choose where you need to get, caught up to date on mental health or whatever that might be, and get to know who's leading those things. Much like this morning, we're going to be hearing from Mayra and Emily and from Equity, but from Myra's our immigration liaison for the city. So last week we heard from the Interfaith Welcome Coalition, who's celebrating a significant year. Can hardly believe that they've been around as long as they have, and it was on Rosh Hashanah as well. So that was it was meaningful. And so we hear also in these updates from different aspects of collaboratives and that effort. So I'm going to hand this over to Mayra and Emily, and thank you for being with us this morning. I know you're busy, but we're all keeping busy out here and moving, and so can't wait to hear what you get to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being interested in this topic of immigrant inclusion. So I'm going to share my screen very quickly to kind of talk about our efforts within the Department of Diversity and Inclusion. Just want to make sure, do you all see my screen?
We do.
Does it look like big or small?
It's now big.
Okay, perfect.
It was the whole screen.
I appreciate it. My name is Mayra Montero, and like Ann mentioned, I'm the immigration liaison, and I lead the Immigrant Affairs Office that is housed with the Department of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. I also have my wonderful colleague, Emily Yaffe here, that she will be talking also about the Language Access Office that is also housed in the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility. So let's start by talking about what is an immigrant inclusion. What does that mean? And by definition, it's the process of integrating immigrants into our society, in this case, San Antonio, and ensuring that they have equal opportunities and support. It's important that we integrate and include immigrants in city services and resources because it promotes diversity. It promotes, that they have a voice in our city process, ensures that they are included and they are participating in city services and programs and information. It also promotes economic growth and also social cohesion. At the end of the day, immigrants have selected San Antonio for a reason. And as community, it's important that we are aware about the beauty, what they bring to the city, the talents, the skills, but as well as helping them to integrate by removing barriers that prevents them for accessing programs, services, and information. Let's talk about the immigrant landscape in San Antonio. And this is important for your awareness. So, in San Antonio, we have about 2.5 million residents. This is all the metro area. And about 300,000 are immigrants, which is about 12% of the population. That's a big population, most likely on your day-to-day. In your work, you might encounter an immigrant family that is seeking information or services. They're everywhere. And it's important as a compassionate, welcoming city that we support it in the best way we can. Now let's talk about what are the different countries? And I really love to show this screen because it really shows how diverse our immigrant population is becoming in San Antonio. Mexico, still represents the majority of the immigrant population with about 56%, but you see other countries represented here. Philippines, Afghanistan, India, and China, and each country brings its beauty in terms of language, culture, traditions, and it's important that we embrace that because that's what makes San Antonio San Antonio. Now let's talk about the economic contributions. In you often in the media we talk. There's a lot of negative opinions about immigration and immigrants. Come in and take over certain things. And the reality is that immigrants not only, they bring that culture, language, talents to our city, but they also drive in economic and labor force contributions. So I really, really like to highlight this because there's sometimes misconceptions that immigrants are not paying taxes, and they are paying taxes. They are paying taxes just like me and you. They are contributing about 670 million to our state and local taxes. And they also are homeowners. They are, some of them own houses, some of them are renting. They're also working in San Antonio. They represent about 181 or 40% of the labor force. And it's important to also highlight that also immigrants are also small business owners. And these data, I don't show it because this is the most up-to-date data, but a data from 2019, it indicated that 30% of all San Antonio small business are immigrant owned. And a small business is a way for them to, to find, have a job and put food in their table, because sometimes due to their immigration status, they're not able to work. So it's important to highlight. And in the other right side, you see the overall economic and labor contributions of immigrants in the state. Now, with all these contributions and benefits that our immigrant community bring to San Antonio, it's important to discuss the barriers to access. And this is where us as diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility come along. We want to make sure that immigrants and linguistically diverse communities have equal access to city services and information. But we also need to take into account that they have barriers, and our goal is to remove as much barriers as possible. And for our immigrant community, one of the top 3 barriers are feared, language and technology, and legal. And with fear is that they often hesitant to apply for public benefits. That's even including our city services and programs, because they're afraid that it's going to impact their immigration status if they have a pending immigration case, or they're just afraid that their information is going to be shared with immigration services. So there's this lack of trust in local government. And also what we do with the information we collect, like name or address, for example. They're afraid that this is going to be shared with immigration offices. Also the language and technology, that and Emily will be talking more about language, but what it means is that the lack of bilingual staff and interpretation or translation services still poses a barrier for our immigrant community that speaks other language to access programs and services. Also limited internet access. San Antonio, it's working on, for in the digital divide, but for our immigrant community, limited internet access poses a major barrier to access to city services and information. They also the struggle with application process. Like if they don't have the internet access, how can they apply for city programs and services if they don't have it? Or even like navigating the application process, filling certain things is challenging. So it's important that as a city, we recognize that and that we are going to the immigrant community to assist them with application process. When it comes to legal, especially for our undocumented immigrants, those are individuals without immigration status, without Social Security or work authorizations. It's difficult to apply for federally funded programs, for example, Medicaid or food stamps. Those programs, immigrants without status are not able to apply. Like let's say mom and dad, if they don't have legal status. However, if they have U.S. citizen children, their children can apply through that process. So many times, immigrants don't know that if they have U.S. citizen children, that they can apply to these federally funded programs. So it's a lot of not on the unknown, a lot of just fear. And also, especially immigrants with undocumented immigrants without status, they cannot obtain ID because, in Texas, an ID requires proof of you have a Social Security, that you have status, therefore they can't get an ID. And not having an ID creates even more barriers in terms of opening bank accounts, in terms of getting a lease. So it's important that we recognize those struggles. And for that reason, there's been a lot of work done with the consulate offices to ensure that undocumented populations, they have a consular, matricula consular, because in certain spaces, that is accepted, for example, for opening a bank account or lease. So those are some of the barriers that I wanted to highlight today. And for this reason, because all these barriers exist, the Immigrant Affairs Office was created in 2019 to be a community liaison to municipal government. That means that immigrants, they often call my office to seek city information or other services that are outside of the city, and making sure that our immigrant community is connected to a resources, that are also a nonprofit, faith-based community, any other agency has that connection to our city. I also provide training and technical support to city departments to ensure that they understand who our immigrants are, what are the barriers, how we can better support this population. We're also very excited that in the next year, by January of next year, all the way kind of to December, we're going to be working on what it's called an immigrant inclusion plan. What that means is that we're creating an advisory board of diverse immigrants with lived experience and nonprofits to kind of come in together as a collaborative and talk about how we can improve city programs and services and our reach to our immigrant populations. We want to hear from the community. What are the strategies? What are the priorities for our immigrant population in San Antonio? And it's also important that we are up to date in terms of data, in terms of how many immigrants we have in our city, what are the different countries, where do they tend to work, how many of them are in schools, how many of them are in universities. This is important because it drives decision-making in city programs, but as well as this report is much needed along with our nonprofits, faith group communities, to just have an understanding of our immigrant population. And with that, the city of San Antonio has several immigrant inclusion strategies. One of them, like I mentioned earlier, our Immigrant Affairs Office, which is the office that I lead. Then we have our Language Access Office that Emily is going to talk about the efforts that she's working on. But also the city of San Antonio provides funding to nonprofits to provide legal services to our immigrant population, know your rights presentation in terms of the right to, interpretations, for example, the right to not being discriminated, in their workplace, but as well as case management. And another strategy that I didn't include here, but it's also important, is our efforts with the Migrant Resource Center that I'm sure you have learned about the Migrant Resource Center, and the work that they're doing to support migrants that are transitioning to our city. So with that, that's my brief presentation, and I'm gonna pass it to Emily to kind of share the efforts that she's working on in the Language Access Office. Thank you.
Mayra. So I'm Emily Yaffe. I'm the Language Access Manager, and I've got two team members as part of the office. Tilla Khan, who's a Senior Management Analyst, and we have an open vacant position that we'll be filling hopefully soon. And so we're an office of three that's wholly focused on improving, reducing the barrier for linguistically diverse residents, so that they can access city services no matter what language they speak. This all comes from Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which states that you can't discriminate against people based off of race, color, national origin. And from that national origin piece, we get language access, because if you discriminate against somebody based off of their language, it also means that you're discriminating against them based off of where they come from. So as a city with that does receive federal funds, and as a city with a non-discrimination ordinance that really upholds these values, we really take seriously language services and making sure that when we have city events like town halls, that there's interpretation available. And then that there's also a process for requesting and translation and other means of providing a connection with. So one of the things that we did last year was a task force. We gathered together people from a bunch of different language communities and spoke with them about what current city services look like, and talked with them about ideas for further reducing language barriers. And from that group, we got a lot of great support for updates to a language access plan, which will go into effect with the city, and also specific initiatives that interface with the community directly. And one of those is the I-Speak cards. This is, won't go too deep into every aspect of the language access plan, but I do want to share with you our I-Speak cards. Screen 2. Share, there we go. So this is a PowerPoint that our facilitator for the task force shared with them. And one of the initiatives that we talked about with the task force was, how do we help community show government workers that they have a language need that needs to be met? And so one of the best practices for doing that is through I-Speak cards. So we worked directly with community members to identify what's the design that's going to work well for San Antonio, how do we best explain the purpose of these cards, and so on. And so based off of these few slides, they gave us feedback. And from their feedback and information, we were able to develop 2 versions of an I-Speak card. So I'm not sure, do you guys see on screen the lovely papel picado on top?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is an I-Speak card for Pashto. On the top half of the card, it tells people about their rights to language services in Pashto. It has these logos in the middle that talk about where these services are applicable, just as some examples. And then there's a card that they can cut out and keep with them that says on one side in English, as you can see, I speak Pashto, and asks the city employee to please provide services. And then as we go lower, it has that same information on the inside of the card so that the person who has it can always remember what the purpose of this is for. There is a little bit of blank space on the second page, and that will be used for having a better connection with our website once we have an updated website. So for now, it's just how to get in contact with the Language Access Office. So if somebody wants to, for example, request additional cards, they can. In addition to this card, we have a fancy print version that is about this size. And I just lost the one that I had in my office. We're still working on getting those printed in all the languages, but it has a tear off portion to the card so that they can keep it in their wallet, for example. So basic, same content, just a smaller print on nice cardstock paper. Those are going to be the ones that we bring out with us to programs and events so that we can share with community about what this is and teach them about their rights to language services. And then the full paper version that you saw on screen, that'll be the one that's available for self-print on our website. So making sure that we're going out and teaching people about this service, and then also making sure that folks can access cards as they need them and learn about the work from our office. Just as a quick note about what we do to support city employees is we help them learn best practices for using language services and also engagement practices to make sure that their programs and events can connect effectively with people whose primary language isn't English. So we talk about how to incorporate translation interpretation services early on. We're working to provide additional service for bilingual employees. They are such an asset to our workforce. They provide so much on the day-to-day, and we want to make sure that they have the support that they need to stay resilient as they do this kind of double work sometimes, but also that they're supported with the skill set to do business in their additional language. And then we support departments in having the process and procedures in place so that employees are ready and able to provide services as needed, and then that they're very responsive to requests. I'll stop there.
I didn't know at all about the cards. That's really exciting. That's some good work.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. And I'm as I'm listening and how far this has come in the last half a dozen years, is pretty amazing. Like if we had, one more session, we do have one more session next week. It's going to be mostly focused on refugees with cultural lingua. But we've come so far. And it's such a great example of being a compassionate city, to treat all others in ways we wish to be treated, that ethic, and likewise not treat others in ways we don't wish to be treated. And like I have to even say this, but in this really polarized kind of context we're living these days, I'd really like to hear some advice from the two of you. For those of us who spend a lot of time, in community with lots of different people, how we can best, and I'll let you think on it, we're going to take a pause, but even our language, right, can impact what's going on and people's perceptions. And, how can we best, as faith and community leaders, support these efforts in ways that will create more of the change we wish to see in the world, to create a larger space. And specific advice is usually the most helpful, like even language or... So we're going to take a pause while you think on that really great advice. It's 8:29. And so we always take a pause about now to thank everyone for coming today, and anyone who might need to depart to get on with their day, that's okay too. So thanks for being with us. As I said, next week, We're going to be hearing from Cultural Lingua and work that's being done specifically with refugees, people making San Antonio their home. And that will be the end of kind of our mini series and Be the Neighbor. And I think we'll be looking at the environment following that and what's been happening in terms of sustainability and environmental concerns. So thank you everyone for coming. And I'm going to come back now to Mayra and Emily. How can the community, faith community, how can we help
Yeah,
with
go
this?
ahead.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Emily, go ahead.
Okay. So a couple of ideas. One is a very easy one. If you have meetings with folks who could benefit from being more aware about the I Speak cards or the initiatives that we do, please let us know. I'm looking for opportunities to go out and share more about the I Speak cards so that we can get them out into community. So that's one quick win. The second one is it can be daunting to do this for the first time. So if you have a friend who prefers to connect with services in their primary language, whether that be Spanish, sign language, Vietnamese, what have you, if you could help them make that connection and be that first person to say, okay, well, it sounds like you need to meet with Metro Health. Metro Health, they are there to provide you with the interpretation services that you need. If you guide them into that first connection, walk with them into the office so that they feel comfortable asking for that, I think that would make a world of difference, and it would probably pass along from one person to the next person. So that's a next step. And then my last one is to disrupt negative rhetoric around the immigrant and refugee community by sharing your personal experiences of connections with others. So if somebody says something that doesn't ring true and poses the community in a bad light, I think sharing about those personal experiences that you have makes a world of difference, saying, well, that doesn't really make sense to me. I know so-and-so, and they've been a really great friend. This is my experiences with them. And just having that kind back and forth conversation can oftentimes be really helpful to get somebody to start shifting away from maybe the things that they're hearing on these big echo chamber stages to more in the reality of space that they're familiar with.
That's helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. She provided very, very great advice. And the way I kind of see is, you know, immigrants are just human beings, just like us, like you and me, and they have same dreams, same, scared about certain things. So at the end of the day, it's just having a connection with that community and guiding them to a resource. A lot of them, they feel lost, especially when they come into San Antonio for the first time, and being just friendly, like, hey, good morning, how are you? And of course, if you have a connection to, let's say, if you encounter an immigrant and you want to see where the support is, you can call. Even 311 has information now of how do we can connect an immigrant to resource. You can also contact my office. For me, I don't pay attention much on what's happening in the political. It gives me sanity, to be honest, because there's so much negativity out there. I'm just trying to focus on our local efforts and how as community we can support and be compassionate and connect this community to the resource. I would say the faith community in general is a trust agency for our immigrant community. It's a trust because that's where a lot of the connections happen. So you are doing amazing work in your day-to-day, because I know the faith community is a trust agency for our immigrant community. So doing what you're doing, it's great. Now you have more information today that was provided by Emily, by me, that there's these other additional resources that you are aware. Sometimes awareness brings to understanding, to connection. So I thank you all for the faith community of everything you're doing, because I know for the immigrant community, it's a place where they feel safe and they feel they can trust, and they can get connections to resources. So that's all some of the advice I wanted to share today. Thank you, Anne, and thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. I'm also, and so I'm hoping anybody who has a thought or question, if you'd raise your hand. But we also, Sacred Powers at the Intersection. So Bill Neely is with us this morning. And I know that sacred.org is utilized in terms of migration and immigration and refugees and those housing, all the resources that all humans, residents are looking for and need. I'm wondering, and I have no idea, I'm wondering if there's more connection that's needed with sacred.org to make that even more beneficial in terms of, the migrating community. I don't know what that is. I'm just raising the question and thought. So I don't know if Bill, or if you have thoughts or Bill has thoughts, but I'm just raising the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. We did meet with Bill, I believe, last year to talk about a resource directory. The thing about the resource directory, based on best practice that we have kind of encountered, is useful when an immigrant, first of all, has internet access, right? When an immigrant knows how to navigate, and based on the barriers that I talked earlier, a resource directory is helpful. But what we have seen is helpful with the immigrant serving population, like immigrant serving organizations that are trying to connect. One of the best practice is kind of using a promotora model that, training promotoras on services, directories. That's the best way where we can connect immigrants to resources. So we also, the city has an immigrant resource directory, and what we've seen is mostly used, and it's great, we like that it's used by schools, by nonprofits, just to have an understanding of what resources is available. But still, there's this barrier of our immigrant community not knowing where the resource is. That's why, like, one of the things that we kind of, Emily and I, are working on, it's really the city outreach practices, establishing connections, going to spaces, because that's how the community is aware of resources. Also, best practice, I would love this in the future, and hopefully it happens, where there's a one-stop shop where immigrants can go to receive resources and information, similar to the Migrant Resource Center, but for immigrants that are in San Antonio. Migrants are transitioning. So there's really not a one-stop shop kind of model like that. They're spread out, right, through the nonprofits like Raíces, Catholic Charities, Cortelingua, all these nonprofits. That they're doing amazing work. But they're, being spread out in more areas, that will be very, very helpful. So that's kind of what we have learned through some community input, but also based on best practices and reaching other cities in terms of that. So that's what I wanted to share about that. I don't know if Emily has another thought about that.
I think that was
We also have a hand
response.
up, we'll go to, but go ahead, Emily.
No, I think that was a great whole response, and be happy to
Okay.
turn it over to Bianca.
It's actually Patricia. You say Bianca. What's the deal on yours?
Oh, it's because don't worry about that.
Okay. Well, it's not Bianca. This is Patricia Castillo. So,
good morning,
Patty.
I just wanted to let y'all know that in the work that we're doing with COPS Metro, one of the projects that we're working on is parish IDs for immigrants. And that is something that we've already met with Chief McManus, and he has agreed to honor parish IDs
What
for
does that mean, Patty? Parish IDs.
that immigrants that are members of parishes will get issued a ID from their parish stating that they are an active and involved member of the parish community. And, you know, just because everywhere you go, people ask you for an ID, you know, if whatever you want, you're trying to do or purchase or be involved in, or if you have an interaction with law enforcement, you know, law enforcement will be instructed to accept a parish ID as a legitimate formal form of identification.
We might have to look at that language though, because I think about the Muslim community.
Yes.
And so parish is a word that is kind of focused in one direction, or at least we might want to look at how that sounds. So what you're saying is that they get an ID that comes
Yes.
from their faith community where they're connected now. So,
Exactly.
wow, that could be good too. Yeah.
I think so too. And, you know, and maybe we do have to, you know, get some new direction in terms of, you know, what the language needs to say or how we address those as a tool, right?
Mhm.
And that's okay. To me, that's fantastic. You know, the more broad that ID can be, the better. You know, the more people we can help, you know, and hopefully, you know, prevent them from getting in further trouble for lack of ID. And so that's I wanted to let y'all know that that is something we are actively involved in getting accomplished with COPS Metro, and you know, and the focus is on the immigrant community.
Beverly, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ditto what Pat has said. For the last 3 years, we have actually funded that effort with Cops Metro in the West Side. And I will tell you that I was working with Josephine just literally yesterday, and Isaiah Bonta, who is the organizer for the West, and the numbers that they have done and the stories that they have told in terms of those IDs, and it's called Parish ID, but it's not necessarily. I mean, that's just sort of the initiative, but it's with the help of the faith communities that
Right.
these IDs are gotten. So the ID is not called Parish ID. It is developing those documents, right, Pat? I mean, it's developing identification documents, but we're working with parishes to be
Right.
able to make it a major initiative in their congregations.
Mhm.
And so, and it has been very successful. We were just going over the success numbers yesterday with Isaiah and Josephine. So thank you, Pat, for saying that. But it's effective, and I think we can spread that
Yes.
even
Mhm.
more.
Further.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, this is I didn't know that about that initiative, so it's really good to know about the initiative. For SAPD, the city of San Antonio has what it's called the Enhanced Library Card. This is it's an effort by the public libraries. So it's a card enhanced, meaning that it has a photo, it has an address, it has a date of birth, it has where the district, the residents from, and this is accepted by SAPD. These, in fact, these requests came from the community a while back. I think was in 2019 or so. And so now the enhanced library card is expanded to all the public library branches. So there's an immigrant that wants to get the enhanced library card, they can. It's free. They just basically have to go to their closest public library, you know, fill out a short form, and it's free and it's sent to their home. And this is accepted by SAPD. So that's another thing that I wanted to share with the community. And I will probably, oh, thanks, Emily, for putting it out there, because this is another way that we want to make sure that our immigrant community, that interaction with police is smoothly as much possible, because we know there's this fear in police, right? That is a thing. And also us, both our offices, we're also working with SAPD as well, just to provide them the resources, technical assistance as much as we can to be able to improve that kind of connection with our immigrant community. So I just wanted to share that is also another resource, that because you all, the faith community, have direct connections with the immigrant community, it's important that you're aware about this other resource.
It might be even worth the conversation, at least, of, I mean, here there's a system that's already in place that does photographs, and it does this thing, could there be a simple tweak with that could also include the faith community in that information, which would be another access point for people moving and breathing and within San Antonio? I don't know, but it just seems to me there's an important, but maybe not that large of a conversation here that could make a difference by partnering and working together. So it's 8:45, and we're going to close for the day to honor everybody's valuable gift of time. So thanks, Mayra and Emily, for being with us today, for all the work that you do. And thanks, Patty and Beverly, for all the important work that you do. And we can go through the whole list of all the icons on this screen. So thank you all for the work that you do in community for our San Antonio and to become a more compassionate city. I hope you have great weekends. We're supposed to get a little bit cooler sometime next week, even. Lovely. So that will be nice. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week at the intersection. Thanks so much.